All right, just another minute and we will get started. All right, I think we're ready to go. Good morning, everybody. Any questions before I get going? Just looking for my chat. All right, so we left off, we got a little bit into chapter 24, maybe almost halfway in here. We want to start thinking a little bit. We left off here with this thermometer. We want to think a little bit about some foodborne illnesses. There are all sorts of possibilities when we start thinking about some of these potentials. And in some instances, it's the bacterium itself that we ingest, and it colonizes and causes some sort of illness. And in other circumstances, it's the bacterium that's in some sort of product, and it's released or secreted some toxins. And it's the toxins, not the organism itself, that's ultimately causing illness. So there are a couple of different potentials when we think about some of these things. And we'll hit a little of that stuff as we progress through here. As we look at this, it's important to kind of pay attention to some of the details on this when we think about food safety and we think about the potentials that might set ourselves at risk. So as we look at this thermometer, we've got freezing temperatures where we can store foods. We've talked a little bit before when we were thinking about some of the tolerance of microbes. Oftentimes at freezing or refrigerator temperatures, we think of them as being inhibitory. Putting something in the freezer doesn't necessarily kill the organisms that are potentially within there, not just inhibit or slow their growth. Same holds true with the refrigerator, causing a stasis, a halting of that growth potentially, right? There are also a few bacteria that kind of prefer or maybe tolerate, maybe not necessarily prefer, but can tolerate growing at refrigeration temperatures. And they set the stage for other concerns. So again, we'll touch on some of these in a bit. As we look at the upper end of this, we can see, and oftentimes if you cook things, you will see that it says, make sure you've cooked thoroughly, potentially, to an internal temperature of 160 or something like that. Depends on what you're looking at, all right? That in turn is temperatures that ensure whatever potential pathogens have been killed. And it's more than just bacteria that we think about, although right at this first little bit of it, that's what we're targeting. There are other possibilities with maybe some helminths, some cysts for worms, and not heating the meats up thoroughly sets the stage for those to not truly be targeted, and that sets the stage for, potential infection with worms. So cooking things thoroughly, reaching the proper temperatures for whatever sorts of things you're thinking about, ensures that they've been cooked to a sufficient temperature to ensure that whatever sorts of pathogens are no longer a potential threat. In this area is where we have concerns. So between refrigeration and the temperature that you really should be keeping stuff, holding things at a warm temperature, a hot temperature, maybe is a little better to say than just warm. All right. So you can, maybe see situations like salad bars or something like that, where one of the restaurant workers is out with a thermometer and they're testing different things, checking temperatures to ensure we're not in this danger zone, that temperatures are consistent enough to ensure that whatever is out there is being held at temperatures that ensure that they're safe. When the temperature drops, when we go into this area, this danger zone, it sets the stage for possible microbes to cause issues. And as I look at this stuff, it, makes me think stuff possibly happening at home, or it could also be maybe picnic sort of situation where things maybe should be kept on ice and they're not, or they should be held at nice warm temperatures and they're really not. They're just on a plate on the picnic table. That's a potential issue. And dependent upon how long that stuff has been allowed to stay within this zone is really what sets the stage for possible dangers, right? Something that's, been in this area for a very short period of time, probably not that big of a deal. Something that's been left out for hours is a different situation, right? Or potentially, just leaving stuff out on the countertop and eating it the next day. Maybe that's a potential issue as well when it comes to things that really should be held at warm temperatures or refrigerated, all right? So keep some of that stuff in mind as you're thinking about possibilities for some of these issues. And it oftentimes when we think about foodborne illnesses, oftentimes when this stuff happens, it's your own fault. Most of the food poisonings, most of these issues occur from your own negligence, from something that you've done at your house. You haven't cleaned something thoroughly, or you've allowed something to be in this danger zone, and it's ultimately what's made you ill. But I can almost guarantee if you get any sort of issues with some foodborne illness, the first thing that comes to your mind is, where did I go out to eat? I oftentimes like to blame Taco Bell. I don't like going to Taco Bell, but I feel like just driving by Taco Bell is sufficient. I smelled it, and now I got the runs. All right. Was it Taco Bell's fault? I bet you not. All right. It's probably something from your own kitchen. All right. And that might be a little bit disturbing. You don't want to think that it was your own self that did that to you, but it's definitely a possibility. All right. So most, when we think about restaurants, the health department ensures that they're following proper practices. They are probably very clean in their kitchen, maybe considerably more so than your own, even if you think you're doing a good job. I would hope by the end of this semester, you're like, yep, my kitchen is pretty clean. All right. But you don't know. All right. So here we've got an image. This is a fecal smear or a stool sample. And in this, we can see some bacteria. You'd expect to see that. We are seeing lots of little gram-negative rods. And then there's other stuff. And this I would think should potentially be of concern as you're looking at a blood smear. You'd expect to see bacteria. You'd expect to see debris. This is a pretty good smear, really, not with a bunch of excess garbage. What we do see that raises some concerns are numerous types of other cells, red and white cells. You would not, or you should not, expect to see red blood cells, erythrocytes, in a fecal sample in a healthy situation, right? So it should definitely be grounds for concern. There's handfuls of bacterial infections. There's other infections, parasitic infections as well, but a few bacterial infections that set the stage for bloody diarrhea. And the issues that result with that are definitely of concern when that is occurring. So Shigella here as a patient with shigellosis is an example. Little gram-negative rods, as I just said a second ago, and then again, white and red cells alike. I always like these types of images, these electron micrographs. I just think, oh man, these bacteria, they look awesome. Salmonella, if you were infected with these guys, you would think it looked so awesome. So these guys entering intestinal epithelial cells and ultimately, see, within the kind of cytoskeleton trying to take hold and, well, establish infection. You potentially saw some of these guys in lab with some of the Sims Deeps that you worked with, and you could see some blackish H2S production in those tubes. So this next image, another gram-negative bacterium. Here's an electron micrograph of it. This is Vibrio cholerae, causes cholera. And there's all sorts of issues with this. It's oftentimes the situation is like some sort of poor sanitation, often thinking maybe natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, numerous things might set the stage for maybe the infrastructure to break down, maybe for sewage to spill into the water supply, or maybe it just happens naturally through poor levels of sanitation in the first place. All right, it really kind of just depends on the circumstance. So here we can see one potential issue with this, with poor sanitation, and potentially where we're also getting our drinking water. Wastes go here. Maybe we bathe here. Maybe we drink our water here. Maybe we do all of our business right here. That's an issue. So any sorts of situations where you're imbibing in this, and really the infectious dose for cholera is quite large. You need massive amounts of bacteria to be consumed in order for infection to result. But the potential for that is tremendous in these situations. A single gulp, a single mouthful of water has the potential to give you the million plus, or maybe it's closer to almost a billion bacteria that you need to actually become infected. That seems like an enormous amount, but really a single mouthful is really all it is. All right, not so much. All right, and then potential serious, maybe fatal consequences result as a result of the organisms getting in and causing massive issues. So the cholera ultimately causes massive amounts of fluid loss, serious diarrhea, and you get electrolyte imbalance as a result of that, serious dehydration, and again, possible fatal consequences. So here we can see in this clinic, in this infirmary, we've got a bunch of cots. Here and up above, some buckets, 5-gallon buckets, and a hole cut right into the cot. So when you gotta go, there you go. And it says here for easy monitoring of fluid loss, which is probably true. We measure it in 5-gallon bucket loads. All right, that's kind of disturbing. In a single day, someone with serious bouts of cholera has the potential to lose upwards of a full 5-gallon bucket in diarrhea. That's, if you can't imagine that that's going to do you in, it will. All right. There are, and we don't see this, but most of these people are receiving IV fluid replacement. That's basically all we really can do, is try to ensure that they get ample amounts of fluid to try to help bring them out of this. So with that, there is serious issues with that, and you definitely, it says here to monitor, but I think a small little bedpan is not going to be sufficient to deal with that, so they bust out the buckets in the first place. All right. Definitely issues. With the massive amounts of diarrhea, there's all sorts of malabsorptive issues as a result of that. Lipids are released. You get a lot of that that's basically floating on the top. And they oftentimes describe this as rice water stools with the flecks of lipid in there. And that's kind of disturbing in and of itself. Just the fact that that sheer volume to me is pretty disturbing. And if you think about that and the potential for that quantity to be released, and if we go back to poor sanitation, if all of that makes its way back to the water supply, the potential for others to become infected is huge. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. 1800s, I don't remember exact dates, but John Snow in London was credited with saving massive amounts of people from cholera, and it was similar issues where their sewage dumped right into the river where their water supply was coming from. That lent to big problems. So they credit him as kind of being the father of epidemiology, as he started studying the path of disease, and cholera was really the focus. They didn't even know what caused this nasty GI issue. They thought it was some sort of poison, some sort of invisible things, which it is ultimately a toxin that was causing the issue in the first place. Shifting over, Helicobacter. Helicobacter pylori is the organism. It's got it right there. Probably can't see it very well. These guys want to live within the stomach, which is an area that you typically would think of as being not a very hospitable place to decide to live with the copious amounts of stomach acid. So the Helicobacter gets in and it causes a decrease in mucus production. It also has some buffering capacity that it can create kind of a shield, a barrier from the hydrochloric acids within the stomach, protecting itself. So as it degrades and moves through some of that mucus, it sets the stage for stomach acid to actually come in contact with the lining of the epithelial cells. That sets the stage for the ulcer formation as a result of that. And possibility as it progresses to target or move in toward the vessels, and then we think of bleeding ulcers if it gets deep enough, and it doesn't take too much. This almost looks like the same image, kind of is, but it's not the same player. Clostridium difficile, these organisms, we've talked about this before, stuff like antibiotic issues where you're taking these broad spectrum drugs, and it sets the stage for these bacteria to bloom, if you will, to over proliferate as a lot of the other normal flora gets degraded. So you've got some of these, few of these we will maybe think as normal flora, but they're held in check by the rest of the other players within the GI tract. And as the others' populations decline, you get the potential for an overgrowth. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. The normal flora, and then for whatever reason, often antimicrobial therapy, it sets the stage for these guys. And it can be other circumstances where what you've got, your good guys, their proportions are just a little bit out of sorts, if you will. So it's good to have a large variety of cells that make up your normal flora and not just a few of the same. So regardless, something happens wiping out the diversity, setting the stage for these guys, and they are more resistant than the majority of other microbes. That's what lends to their potential to get this kind of leg up through broad spectrum treatment. It doesn't really target them. So they colonize, they proliferate, they release a couple of different types of toxins. Those toxins increase more of kind of an immune response, but that immune response isn't so good for us. It helps really kind of the bacteria instead. And in part of the response, you get kind of an increase overproduction of the cells. That lends to massive sloughing off of cells, and these dead cells start to form what we call a pseudomembrane that can cause big patches of sloughing off skin within the intestines, and they call that pseudomembranous colitis. You don't want it, pretty sure. So there are all sorts of issues with this, problems for sure, and trying to cure. We think about other, serious types of antibiotics that might cause other issues, all right? And deep down, it's trying to get this back under control. This normal flora needs to come back. And we've mentioned a little of this, I know, before, thinking your own microbiota. There are potentials to treat Clostridium difficile or C. diff with fecal transplants, where you get someone else's normal flora to help repopulate and recolonize. And it sets the stage for giving you back this more normal sort of situation, potentially, right? And it really kind of, well, it depends on what their normal players are in the first place, because it definitely can impact you in the process of this. Let me flip out of here and shift over. I know there was a table there, but there is a table initially that I want to hit on that talks about E. coli, because we've kind of glossed over and haven't really mentioned E. coli, although we kind of started this chapter with E. coli. As we said, the 0157H7, all right? Enterohemorrhagic E. coli is the 0157H7. But there are a number of different types of E. coli infections, all right? All sorts of different possibilities, and it's slight variations that they harbor that set the stage for different types of reactions in ourselves. So the enterotoxigenic ETEC, a traveler's diarrhea, that's something that is relatively common, and it's right here. I'm going to scroll back to this table because it's a little better to just put it all right in here. Traveler's diarrhea is something that's pretty common as you go elsewhere and, drink some of the water. something like that, that sets the stage where you might get some bacteria that your body's not quite accustomed to. And it sets the stage for some of these issues. The consumption of E. coli is an issue in and of itself. I think we probably could just leave it at that. So the E-Tech, these guys, some of the issues that set the stage for their success, maybe virulence factors, heat stable enterotoxin, that's an issue. And what we mean by that is we are, thinking, well, we can just heat this up, and that will be all fun and good. It's not. The toxin is still viable. That sets the stage for issues. So the traveler's diarrhea issue, it's not super serious, mild, little bit of watery diarrhea, self-limiting. All right. There are the potentials for maybe some antimicrobial therapy. There are definitely some issues with this. And as we see as we move down, a few instances when, yes, maybe some antibiotics, but there are a number where we see supportive therapy like fluid replacements. Treatment with antibiotics would be ill-advised because some of these organisms, in the process of trying to target them, to kill them, they're gram-negative. They've got an outer lipid layer, and that lipid layer, lipopolysaccharide layer, has the potential to be very antigenic, to stimulate and very strong immune response against this, and that has the possibility of overwhelming our body and really kind of, you're trying to treat it, but it actually makes matters more worse. So the enteroinvasive E. coli, these guys have the potential as a result of a plasmid within there that allows them to get into cells, to break into them. So mild diarrhea, but it does have the potential to progress to dysentery, so copious amounts. Colitis, inflammation of the GI tract is also a possibility. So, and it needs to be distinguished from Shigella. There are some similarities with some of the toxins that we see in a few of these, and differentiation is important. They do have toxins that are similar. And that's this enteropathogenic that I was just at with the Shiga-like. So they've got erythrocyte effacement pathogenicity island. This basically helps them to target and cause issues to the cells to basically get blood as this gene is expressed. So fever, vomiting, non-bloody diarrhea, and dehydration, potentially fatal with this. Self-limiting possibility. And then the enterohemorrhagic, these are the ones that set the stage. This is the 0157 fits in this for bloody diarrhea. Right. So the virotoxin. So antibiotics, you can see there's a couple where there are some antibiotics, but a handful really ill-advised. And the HUS is hemolytic uremic syndrome, so causing rupture and lysis of red cells. Those cells wind up stuck within the nephrons of the kidney, causing blockages, damage, and potential kidney failure as a result of that. All right, that's all of the E. coli, little tidbits of that. It's really the table we were, where did my, here it is. So, and I see as I'm scrolling past a couple more foodborne illnesses, Bacillus cereus. This is a bacterium we've worked with in the lab a little bit. It does set the stage for issues, and it is a spore former. So thinking some issues with that. The spores ultimately can germinate, and in food that's not held at the proper temperatures, it sets the stage for issues. So rice dishes are a potential culprit with some of the serious Yersinia, not the plague, not Yersinia pestis, but enterocolitica and pseudotuberculosis are both potentials for GI issues as well. And I know they're going to be mentioned down here in this table. So some of the bacteria, this is really why I switched to the textbook, was to get this table up here. So Bacillus cereus infections, that is the culprit as well. Nausea, abdominal pain, cramps, diarrhea, possibly vomiting. You maybe got it coming out of both ends. Not so good. So contaminated rice or meat, even after cooking, and that's because of the spore forming potentials with those guys. Stool sample or vomitus if we're trying to look for the specific organism. If you've got the potential where there's some of the uneaten food left over, we could sample that as well and look for the presence of the bacteria. As far as treatment with this, it's self-limiting. So there are no drugs to treat that. Let it run its course. Campylobacter jejuni causing gastroenteritis. This is one of the main bacteria that we think about for pasteurization of milk. It is a definite pathogen that we can see from raw or unpasteurized dairy, and it sets the stage really for some serious issues. So fever, diarrhea, cramps, vomiting, sometimes dysentery. You can have, and it's something that does take some time to progress, setting the stage for that. And it can be definitely more pronounced with organ or autoimmune issues with that. So like I said, unpasteurized milk, undercooked chicken, and contaminated water all have the potential for maybe getting you some Campylobacter. So the milk is really a big one with that. So typically nothing, but there are some potentials maybe with the severe organ involvement where antimicrobials might be prescribed. So erythromycin or some Cipro. Cholera we saw, Vibrio cholerae with severe diarrhea and fluid loss, maybe lending to shock and death. So definitely serious concerns with cholera. So there, you know, this sidebar, it's kind of interesting. There are all sorts of things when we think about pathogens and humanity and, you know, our abilities to try to fight things and those pathogens' ability to try to, you know, deal with our immune responses. And we think of over the courses of time, our bodies become pretty good at recognizing these things. And it sort of makes you wonder how we keep some of these things still as possibilities. So there are things like malaria and sickle cell disease that kind of seem to have co-evolved, where if you happen to have the genes for sickle cell, your likelihood of getting malaria and actually getting sick are almost non-existent. So that's maybe a potential benefit. If you've got full-blown sickle cell disease, that's maybe not the best situation, and your life expectancy isn't so long. But if you're heterozygous, well, maybe you're okay, right? That's interesting, right? I'm not talking about malaria, though, even though that's what I started with. Cholera is where I'm at. And this is also pretty interesting. There are some people that have cystic fibrosis, and these individuals, I don't want to say that they're immune to cholera, but maybe. These people, cystic fibrosis is not a good thing to have. It causes super thick mucus secretions. It impacts the lungs. It impacts the GI tract. and you have issues. You have issues breathing. You have issues with digestion and absorption of nutrients. But in these circumstances, if you happen to come in contact with cholera, cholera causes the mucus secretions to become very, very thin, very watery, hence the copious amounts of diarrhea. People with cystic fibrosis don't have those ill effects. I almost, and I don't think it's necessarily true, but I almost want to say that maybe getting infected for once, they start to feel a little bit better. It could potentially set the stage. Maybe you could use some of these toxins as treatment. I don't know. We use Botox for other stuff. Maybe that could be a potential. So people that are heterozygous, you don't know oftentimes that you're carrying that gene. You also have, you probably experience cholera. You probably know you've got some issues, but it's not something that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm crapping myself to death, right? Again, because of that little bit of potential where you've got genes that make your mucus a little different, right? Carrier situation with cholera, you typically don't, or not cholera, sorry, cystic fibrosis, you typically don't recognize any ill effects whatsoever, but they speculate maybe those people do recognize something when it comes to cholera, right? I don't think you'd want to test that out, right? You don't know. Are you heterozygous for cystic fibrosis? Drink a big glass full of cholera water and find out, all right? I don't think you want to do that, all right? Unless you got the cot with the hole cut in the bottom of it, then you're ready to go. All right. Clostridium difficile, the C. diff infections, like I said a second ago, the pseudomembranous colitis, very watery diarrhea, fever, pain, abdominal pain, numerous issues. The potential for shock and death is a result if it does go septic. So I already went through this. Your normal flora gets altered, setting the stage for these issues, right? So there are handfuls of ways detecting this. And then as far as treatment goes, think about whatever you were being treated for in the first place, we ought to probably stop that. And then there's the potential of switching it up to some azoles or vancomycin, the big dogs, to in turn try to target the Clostridium. I recommend at this point, you better start eating some stinking yogurt. All right. The Clostridium perfringens for gastroenteritis. These guys, there's other issues with perfringens, as we mentioned with some of the skin stuff for gas gangrene, but GI tract issues as well, right? So cramps, diarrhea, and possibility for hemorrhage, but that's a little more rare, right? And no treatment with that. Undercooked meats set the stage for Clostridium. E. coli, we showed that table just a second ago before we got into this. So the handful of different types of strains and various situations with the diarrhea, with the GI issues. You might potentially think somebody else, and if that's the case, you would expect in a fecal sample to find your own E. coli, you're good guys, right? But then the issue would be to weed out your good E. coli from these E. coli. And there's various types of plates. We've looked at McConkey's plates to grow gram-negative bacteria. E. coli shows up on there, pink-looking colonies. And as we look at some of these others, there's a different type of McConkey that's got a sugar called sorbitol in there, and based off of some of the fermentation patterns, you can differentiate them a little bit better. And then there's some other stuff that allows us to further separate. So some more stuff. You thought we were done, but we're not. This table's too big. We had to split it in half. The peptic ulcers, Helicobacter pylori is our culprit with that. It causes all sorts of issues: nausea, bloating, burping, lack of appetite, weight loss, potential if it progresses to perforate the stomach. And there's also possibilities to see blood in the stool. With again, it would be kind of a progression with that. So it can be normal flora, oftentimes kind of considered that way, but it also can be picked up saliva, fecal oral transmission, which always sounds gross, but you just never know, right? There's all sorts of potentials for that. And contaminated food and water, which could set the stage for the fecal oral situation. There's a breath test, which I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it's, as you're blowing into this, I don't know if it's excessive amounts of a specific acid that's being released that you can detect. I don't know for sure with the buffering capacity within there. I don't know if that's causing something to be released. I don't know. I'm sure the text probably mentions something about that. But I don't know. Looking for antibodies in the blood is a potential. It also might mean that you're only able to detect that if it's progressed to making its way into the circulation in the first place, and I think that's probably true. And then stool specimens as well. Handfuls of antimicrobials, antacids, oftentimes in combination, helps to cure the individual of the bacterium and the peptic ulcers, right? So it is pretty interesting. Salmonellosis, there are a lot of different serotypes of these guys. It used to be handfuls of different ones we talked about. Now it's really, Salmonella enterica, different serovariants or serotypes, which we use different immunoassays to classify. Not necessarily truly needed. We find salmonella and we're pretty much good to go with that. So fever, nausea, cramping, headache can have fatal consequences if we're talking little dudes. So contaminated food, handling of eggshells or contaminated animals sets the stage for some of these issues. We've definitely seen an uptick in salmonella with people that have decided they're going to be chicken ranchers. They want to get their own chickens in their backyard, get their own eggs. I think that's fantastic. There's nothing tastier than an egg fresh, but there are definitely issues. And if you don't know what the heck you're doing, you set your stage. You set the stage for making yourself or others potentially seriously ill, right? There's other possibilities with this, and you think, well, it's just on the outside of the egg. It can be on the inside as well. The bacteria can colonize the egg before the shell forms around the egg. So just because the egg looks nice and clean on the outside doesn't mean salmonella is not on the inside, right? So cooking your eggs is also important, all right? Although there are some that will consume them raw, right? That's a little bit gross, right? Salmonella, definitely a potential with that, all right? So just keep that in mind. Shigella, there's a handful of Shigella culprits. Dysenteriae makes you think they really should be causing dysentery. Shigella flexneri, boydii, and sani, all potentials for causing dysentery. Cramps, fever, diarrhea, some potential serious issues, and HUS, like one of our E. coli's as a potential with destruction. So fecal oral contamination, food and drink also set the stage for issues. With this, the Staphylococcus, this is a food poisoning. So it's the toxins released by the organism, maybe not able to actually find the bacterium. Doesn't really matter. It is, like I said, the toxins. So this is one that gets you pretty quick, rapid onset, nausea and diarrhea, vomiting, all of this stuff, pretty quick. All right, lasting a day, maybe two. You can almost guarantee if you are dealing with this stuff as this is occurring, pretty sure you're dying, right? And pretty stinking sure it was Taco Bell's fault, all right? But like I said, you did it to yourself. All right, so there's potential with dehydration, issues with that. And you can have circulation issues, whatever, with the dehydration. So raw, undercooked meat, dairy products contaminated with the staph. Dairy products are a good one with staphylococcus. So creams, custards, dessert types of things like that set the stage. Whipped butter might be a possibility. Something that was prepared and then popped into the refrigerator. Staphylococcus says, that's perfect for me. I love it, all right? It slows it down a little bit, but it still grows and releases toxins. And that sets the stage for concern, all right? So there are immunological tests to look for the toxin, antibody against that. Typhoid fever, this another salmonella up here, but not enterica. This is Salmonella typhi or paratyphi. So with this, it's a little more, definitely more of a concern. Aches, headaches, nausea, lethargy, diarrhea and constipation possible, right? Diarrhea or constipation, why not both? You know that's bad news. So it does have the potential to be spread by asymptomatic carriers. You've probably heard the story of Typhoid Mary. She was a cook, I want to say it was New York. I think it was New York. She was a cook in New York. There were numerous issues. And there were people that getting typhoid fever, epidemiology, you know, trying to figure out all of this stuff, tracing it to her. She basically didn't really care and kept about her ways. There were all sorts of issues with her, and I know there's some stories about her. Locking her up, running her out of town, didn't matter. She'll leave, she'll change her name and work elsewhere, right? Still spreading the salmonella. That's awesome. That's dedication, right? She loved to cook, all right? I don't know. Think about that as your hamburger. It's bad news. All right, Yersinia. We're wrapping it up. Enterocolitica and pseudotuberculosis, mild diarrhea. There are potentials with it making its way into the circulation. Again, fecal oral, contaminated food or water as possibilities. All right, I will stop it there. Any questions or comments? Okay, guys. Have a great day. We'll get the last of this tomorrow or Wednesday. I will get some study stuff posted for you guys very soon.
Are we having another exam, or we're just having a final exam?
This last unit of material will be the final. So it's this will be the last test, the final, which is, I don't know what day that's scheduled. May 2nd. Okay.
And it's only covering this material.
Yes, that's correct. Only this new material, this last unit of stuff.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, guys, have a great